Hello and a very warm welcome back to the garden. Well, it's a warm welcome now because got a fire and a bit of nice sun. It got down to -7 last night and we're in the middle of winter. It's a nice time to brainstorm and it's a nice time to start planning your 2023 garden plan. So just imagine sitting down in your garden in, say, late summer, early autumn, beautiful weather, full of flavour and fragrance and colour. And also that joy, because you've put in all of that passion and hard work into making that a possibility. And so creating a planting plan is the best way to guarantee success. And I've outlined 10 easy steps that anyone can take, no matter what growing zone you're in. 10 steps to make sure that you can create a really solid planting plan and have a really fun year in the garden. The first step is you need to just have a notepad and do a really simple review of the previous growing season. Think about the particular varieties that performed really well and you thought, I need to grow these again. Make a note of them, because if you haven't done the seed order already, it's probably a good idea to start thinking about that before February properly gets underway. The other thing you want to do is think back if there were any serious pest or disease issues. I only rotate if I have had a serious kind of soil-borne pest or disease issue. For example, carrot root fly. Chances are I might have, missed a few carrots and I just don't want to take any risk whatsoever. So I'll plant the carrots elsewhere. And also think about things that perhaps didn't quite work, but you have a rough feeling how to improve them. Make a note of all of these, because this is going to be really useful to look back whilst you're creating your new planting plan and adapt where's needed. The second step is to do a quick assessment of your current growing space. So have a look at your raised beds, have a look at your water infrastructure, have a look at your polytunnels. Just make sure that everything is up to scratch. Make any repairs if necessary, because if you do a planting plan but then you get into having to do a lot of DIY or a little bit of maintenance, that can sometimes set you back in the season. You just want to hit March running. So do a quick assessment, have a look at around the boundaries, make sure everything is nice and ready. And it's a good time as well to expand your garden if you want to expand your growing space. And just a little quick one, over at hughesgarden.com, if you buy any metal raised bed in January, you can get 3 module trays for free. Now the third step is where the fun and the planning begins. You want to make a list of around 10 to 12 of your absolute must-sow, your absolute staple crops that you'd be really sad if you didn't grow them. So for me, those are things like garlic and onions and tomatoes, peas as well. Just make a list of, if you could only grow 12, these would be the 12 that you would grow. And then what you want to do is you want to create some kind of rough bird's eye plan of the garden, just a little sketch, working out where all the containers are, all your beds. And what I like to do, if you have a bigger garden, is to dedicate around half to 2/3 of the space to these 12 staples. If you have a smaller garden, you might want to either do a bit under half or actually most of the garden, just to make sure that you get a real impact, because you're going to be eating these 12 crops. There might be some things where, turnips are nice, but would I really miss them? You've got to prioritize a little bit more ruthlessly if you have a small space. I've already gone into step 4, but for me, after a bit of time, and because I like to try as many different things as possible and also grow flowers and herbs as well, I usually dedicate around half of my growing space to these 12 staples. And when I'm planning, I really think about the sun, because in the garden, you want to think about how you can prioritize where you put your staples depending on their sun needs. So, for example, the tomatoes, they're going to be on the sunnier side of the polytunnel, so I can really make sure that I can maximize their productivity. Now, you want to do this all in pencil to begin with, because there is going to be a lot of natural adjustment, and you'll see why a little later on. Once you've roughly put down your 12 staples and allocated a space for them, it's time for step 5, which is to block off around 10 to 20% of the remaining area. Just block it off. The reason why you want to do this is because sometimes we realise that we've suddenly forgot to put a crop on the planting plan, and then there's actually no space in the garden to do it because it's all going to be full of other things. Or we might go to a seed swap in March or April and find a really nice variety or a really cool unusual crop that we want to grow. By blocking around 10 to 20% of this remaining space off, not having a plan, have that as a bit of freedom. You might have a load of spare seedlings, for example. You never know when you need a bit of extra space. And the other thing as well is to just block off a little bit of space for pollinators as well. Now, step 6, before we start adding the other crops, is to look at your staples and to make a note of when these staples are going to occupy that space. For example, if I'm growing new potatoes are going to be planted in March and harvested kind of by end of June, early July. And making a note when these crops are going to occupy the space is going to be really important for step 8. But first is step 7. You've got to now, looking at what crops that haven't been featured, find a place for them. So perhaps dwarf French beans didn't make the list, but you'd like to grow some. You can start to dedicate smaller areas, because you don't need as many of these crops, to dedicate smaller areas in the garden where these plants go. Again, start thinking about how these different crops might interact with one another. If you're going to grow, say, a big A-frame of runner beans, could you be clever and do that on the sunny side of the bed, so you could create a shady area behind to grow all of your salads, because during the hottest months they're going to enjoy having a bit of shade. It's going to maintain a really nice quality of leaf. So get it filled up. By now you'll have your staples in, you'll have all of the other crops that you want to grow, and you have that bit of space that's just blocked off. Now it's time for step 8. So if you remember making a note of how long your staples are going to occupy their space for, it's now time to start building in succession. So I mentioned new potatoes earlier. They're going to come out end of June, early July. But there's still quite a bit of growing season left over. So what you could do is think, what crops could go after the new potatoes? So brassicas like cabbage or even Brussels sprouts or kale are a great thing to succession plant after your new potatoes. And what that means is that from a single space, you're suddenly going to be able to enjoy 2 harvests from the same bed. Another one is you might have leeks as one of your crops, but you don't have to put in your leeks until maybe June or July if you're starting them off in a seed bed. So you have up until, say, mid to late June to put in a quick crop. So maybe you want to plant really early carrots or some turnips or some kohlrabi. Have a think about how you can start filling in either side of the staples. Once you've done that, it's kind of time for step 8.5 with all of the remaining crops. Make a note of how long these are going to occupy the space and look for potential for where you can fit cash crops in just to get something quick, just to really maximise the amount of food that you can get from your space. And this is especially important if you have a small garden. Now, step 9 is leave your planting plan. Once you've done it, all in pencil, remember, leave it for 2 or 3 days. Don't look at it for 2 or 3 days, because when you come back to it, you're going to come back to it with fresh eyes, kind of a different perspective. Often there's little mistakes that I make, like I dedicate way too much space for kale, and when I'm doing the planting plan I can get a little bit carried away. But when you come back with some fresh eyes a few days later looking at the planting plan, you'll more likely than not find little adjustments that you want to make. You might have remembered about a crop that you forgot to put in. So by doing it in pencil, it allows you to rub it out, make any adjustments to see fit. And this just means that you're going to more likely have a planting plan that will carry you right through the year, and you don't find yourself in May or June having to almost rewrite it. Another thing you can do with step 9 is you could also ask a gardening friend to have a look at it as well and have a little bit of a talk through. There's something nice about meeting up, having a coffee and just sharing your garden plans. Maybe they might have had a really good idea, you might have had a good idea, and it's just a nice way to get a little bit more excited for the upcoming season if you're not already excited enough, and to spot kind of final adjustments that are going to make a nice big difference. Once you are happy with how your garden plan is and you spend a bit of time doing some visualization, so have a look at it, imagine it in your head, imagine how it will be like to enjoy that over summer and all of the food that you're going to eat. You then want to create a tidy or like a permanent version of the plan. So using your rough and ready plan all done in pencil, you can then spend a bit of time creating a tidy version, then go over it in pen, and then use, say, like your phone camera to scan it so you can save it as a digital copy, just in case you lose it. Maybe email it to you as well, just so there's going to be different areas. If you do lose it, you'll be able to easily access your planting plan. Now, if you really want to take your planting plan a step further, you can turn it into a monthly planting plan. This is perhaps one of the things that has made the biggest difference with regards to how much food I've been able to get from this space. It's kind of that guide, that really nice guide holding your hand right through the year, especially if you're trying to grow food for self-sufficiency. Creating a more detailed monthly planting plan makes a huge difference. I've done a course that has been enjoyed by hundreds and hundreds of people. It's called the Productive Planting Plan over at the Abundance Academy. I've got a code YouTube25 for 25% off the course. There's a link down below, and the coupon code expires March the 1st, because ideally you want to create your plan before the growing season gets underway. Finally, if you haven't seen it, check out my winter Q&A that I did here. What I'm also doing is any of the questions left below on that video, I'm going to use those for a spring Q&A coming out in March. So if you want a question answered on video, check it out.